Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to have such a really big crowd today. We think we're going to have a really big crowd today. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Malia Sako, OTD, OTRL. I'm not quite sure what the OTRL means. She is a doctor of occupational therapy. Who specializes in working with individuals with neurological conditions. She's trained in the lifestyle redesign approach to chronic condition management from the University of Southern California, and she currently works at Reactive Physical Therapy and Wellness, which specializes in integrated interdisciplinary neurological care. And Malia, welcome. Let's take the slides off, and we can pin our speaker. I want to welcome you, and I have a couple of questions before you actually start your presentation.
Great.
First of all, you've kept us all wondering, well, I know what it means, but nobody else does. What does more than zero mean? And I think that because it was such a mystery, we had a lot of people register to find out. So tell us what more than zero means, and then I will move on to the next question.
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everyone, or good midday to some folks or wherever you are. Yeah, my name is Malia Sako, and we're going to get into more of the details for what more than zero means. But to give you, I guess, a quick sneak peek, more than zero is an approach that I like to offer my clients as a way to build sustainable, healthy habits. Because as I'll mention later on, I think a lot of us know what we should be doing or could be doing, but it is the follow through, the implementation of it, and keeping it up, which is hard. So more than zero is not a magic wand trick, but it is something that I think makes building routines more approachable and accessible. So, yeah.
Okay. And big question, and I think most people don't understand this. What is the difference between an occupational therapist and a physical therapist?
Yeah, so we are going to get into that. I feel like that warrants more than a quick couple sentence answer. And I think really what I'll do is I'll start off with sharing what OTs do, because depending on where we're at, there might be a lot of overlap with PT. There might be not that much overlap with PT. And I'm lucky that at my clinic, we collaborate a lot together. So there, depending on what our clients need, there might be quite a bit of overlap. So yeah, I'll give that as my answer for now.
Okay. All right. So go ahead. Let's just move forward with your presentation. Thank you.
There we go. Can we all see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about building healthy habits and routines so that we can live well and optimally with Parkinson's. So Sharon gave me a beautiful intro, but again, I'm an occupational therapist and I live in Los Angeles with my husband and my big orange Maine Coon cat. I don't know how many cat people we have on here. And I work at Reactive right now. And I get the pleasure of collaborating in-house with PTs and psychologists and a wellness team as well, so that we can provide our clients with that well-rounded care. And where it's great because we get to collaborate with our clients at lunch and make sure, hey, did you see so-and-so at 10 today? And it's really a treat to have everything in-house. But again, before that, I worked at the faculty practice, getting a lot of training with lifestyle redesign. And our talk today is really going to focus on lifestyle, so that you'll see that background coming in. And as I mentioned, let's first talk about OT. And I'm curious, just a quick poll, you can unmute or type in the chat. How many of you have worked with an OT? And I can't see the chat right now, so I lost it, but I don't know.
Nothing. So far, nothing. Go ahead. If you worked with an OT, just type yes in on the chat.
And you can raise your hand just as Karen did as well.
We can't see them raising their hands. So, okay.
Oh, here's
here we go. We're starting to get responses. Thank you.
Awesome. So Karen said yes, Deborah, no.
Anybody else?
I wonder if Karen's our only OT recipient. Peggy also. Okay. Yeah, so I find oftentimes that when I meet someone, I ask them first if they've worked with an OT for dystonia in the hand. Great, yeah. So oftentimes people say, I don't know what OT is, or they're not even really sure what my title is or why they're there. So I like to start off with just describing OT. So occupational therapy can sound kind of misleading. It can sound like we're career coaches or we help people get back to work. And we can do that. That is within our scope. But to an OT, an occupation is a meaningful activity that occupies your time. So what is an occupation, or what are some examples then? It could be things like our daily activities of brushing our teeth, taking care of our body, like getting dressed and grooming. It could be things that we do within home, keeping a home clean, feeding ourselves. It can be things out in the community as well. So whether that is productivity items like work or volunteering or school, or shopping or meeting up with friends. Now I guess there's kind of a virtual community as well too, so we can help with that. Health management. These bottom two bullet points are what we'll really focus on today. I know I don't have to tell any of you that health management can be a full-time job, if not overtime sometimes. Just managing our medications, attending healthcare appointments, doing things to take care of our health. And that includes lifestyle. So I think we have all heard 1,000,001 times that exercise is so important for living well with Parkinson's, but also eating routines, our sleep, and how we cope with stress and our energy, maybe fatigue as well. And where can you find us? We are in many different places, hospitals, outpatient clinics, community centers, your work, schools, and in your home too. We don't just pop up, but if you get home health. And who do we work with? We work with people across the lifespan. So I think across the lifespan, we have very different occupations, very different meaningful activities. So a 3-year-old is going to have different occupations than maybe what one of us would have. So OTs have a broad scope, but depending on where we're working and who we're working with, we start to get a finer specialty. And OTs take a very holistic approach. So we're looking at not just your physical health, but also mental, emotional, social, spiritual components as well, because we do see how that is all related to our quality of life and our ability to engage in our meaningful activities. And there are many types of OT. I know Karen mentioned hand therapy and focus on the upper extremities, but these are just some examples of OT specialties or types. We can focus on the physical body. We can also work in palliative care, that holistic approach, cognitive rehab, taking a look at your homes and seeing how we can make your home life safer, maybe help you live with more ease. Vision specialties, driving specialties, but today we're going to focus on lifestyle and behavioral treatments. So I wanted to provide us with a couple frameworks for lifestyle. One of my favorites is the Healthy Mind Platter by Dr. Daniel Siegel and David Rock. I don't know if any of us here today are familiar with it, but it outlines kind of our nutrition components for having mental well-being. And I really like how they break up these different factors of our daily routines of our lives, because it helps us to get a more nuanced idea of how should I be spending my time. So we all know that sleep's important. We know that physical time and moving our bodies is important. Focus time might mean learning. It might mean work. It might mean things like navigating our computers. Then these bottom 4, time in, downtime, playtime, connecting time. Those are ones that we tend to kind of just lump together in a wellness, I guess, total like activity. But time in is time that we spend engaging in self-reflection, introspective processes. Some common ones are like journaling or even going to a therapist to reflect, right? Downtime is letting our brain just wander. This is where we can make new neural connections, where creativity comes in, where we're not really asking our brain to do anything specific. We're just letting our brain and our body be. Playtime is that fun, creative, spontaneous engagement with an activity with others, and that can overlap with connecting time. And I think we all feel that importance of having good connections with the people in our lives, or seeking connections too. The other framework that I want to offer for lifestyle is from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and it outlines the 8 dimensions of wellness. And so it might be really tiny on your screen, so I'll go ahead and read them. Emotional, spiritual, intellectual, physical, environmental, financial, occupational, and in this case, they are truly meaning the term occupation, like career and work productivity. And last but not least is social. So I want to present these frameworks for us to start to reflect on our own lifestyle. Where is my time going? What are my main occupations? Am I really heavy on sleep? Am I really heavy on physical time? Do I have a good balance among these 8 dimensions, or this healthy mind platter? And all of these pieces are so important for living well with Parkinson's. And so it really highlights that importance of lifestyle. And as I mentioned, it's not as easy as just saying, okay, I'll sleep more, I'll exercise more, right? It's the development of these routines and the follow through and sustaining of it. And I think from our own healthcare providers, we've heard these recommendations, like you should make sure to exercise, you should make sure to manage your stress, eat well, follow X, Y, or Z diet, manage your meds. And it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's not as easy as just saying, okay. So that is where more than zero comes in. And I'm going to, I know I keep dangling the carrot, but I want to frame it in 3 different lifestyle factors. So today we're going to talk about physical activity, stress management, and sleep, and how the more than zero approach applies. I think that physical activity is a great way to frame more than zero. So we will dive into that first. So a lot of this might be review, but we know that exercise is crucial for Parkinson's, if not just as important as our medications. So exercise can help us make lasting brain changes, and it can help us improve not just our movement, but also our non-movement related symptoms like fatigue, sleep, stress, tremor, or I guess tremor's motor, but it can help to alleviate some of that. And exercise can help our mental health. That's one of the huge non-motor symptoms that can be common in people living with Parkinson's. And we know that aerobic exercise particularly, so that cardio, that the walking, the elliptical, that repetitive movement that gets our heart rate up, can lead to functional connectivity in the basal ganglia, reduce brain atrophy, so reduce brain shrinking, and improve cognitive function. And it stabilizes disease progression, and I'll show you kind of what that can mean. So this is another study that was done back in 2015, but it is one that we really love at Reactive because it shows the importance of a multidisciplinary approach with PT, with OT, with psych. And I want to bring our attention to this graph here. So in this study, they followed 2 groups of people who exercised intensively and who did not exercise intensively. And they tracked them over a period of time. I forget how long, but it was quite a while. And they found that the people who exercised kept at a pretty steady medication. I don't know if we can see my mouse right now, my cursor, but this bottom line right here represents the people who exercised intensively, consistently. And you can see that their medication levels stayed pretty constant. Maybe they went up a little bit. Whereas the people who did not exercise intensively had to progressively increase the dose of their medications, as seen in this top line. And so this idea of sustaining our meds versus increasing our meds over time can be a proxy for disease progression. So this study was taken to mean that consistent intensive exercise can help to slow the disease progression because these people are not having to increase their dose to manage worsening symptoms. And this is just, I think this is a really empowering study because it shows us how much is within our power and our own routines, and not just, at the whim of medications or procedures. So with all of that said, we know all of that, right? But with Parkinson's, just in general, actually, it can be really hard to stay motivated to exercise. But then with Parkinson's, there's an added layer. So with Parkinson's, there can be lower drive, lower motivation, sometimes to more of an extreme of apathy. And this is not just it hurts me when I hear my clients call themselves lazy, because there are many reasons why we don't exercise. And then on top of that, it is also related to brain changes happening. So these are just 3 examples of some studies that show that decreased dopamine is associated with lower motivation and lower drive. So there's a reason for all of this. But that is where more than zero comes in. So I want to give my example. We're finally here. I'm going to talk about more than zero. I want to give an example for physical activity. So I think sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of this too, we set out with really good intentions for exercise. I see a 30-day yoga challenge and I'm like, let's do it, right? Maybe we set expectations for I'm going to be able to run a 5K by the end of the month, which is wonderful, right? And when we have the drive to do that, great, follow through with it. But oftentimes what happens is that we set ourselves up for these really big, intensive exercise plans. Maybe we fall short of it a day or two, maybe for a week, and we start to get a little bit discouraged. And that might mean that we don't do any exercise at all. So, for example, let's say we're sitting on the couch, right? The couch that just calls us in and we don't want to leave, especially in this weather. It's nice and warm inside. Really don't want to get out for that walk that I intended to do. What we might ask ourselves is, can I get more than 0 minutes of exercise? Because more than 0 is better than 0, right? So this is not rocket science, but I think it is a phrase that can become memorable and really help us do some problem solving and decision making. So if I had planned to go out for maybe a 30-minute walk and I'm not feeling up for that, can I ask myself, can I walk down to that stop sign at the end of my block? And then I have total permission to turn back around and come back home. So what happens is a win-win situation, right? If I throw in my shoes, grab my keys, get out the door, and walk up to that stop sign, one of 2 things will happen. I might actually listen to my body and say, yeah, I am really feeling tired today, or my pain is worse today, my fatigue is worse today. I'm going to turn back around and head home. Or I might get to that stop sign and realize that I just needed a little fire under my tush to get started and to get some drive going. And I might decide to continue on for another block or several more. So the more than 0 is really about that initiation of an activity. Can I just get a minute in? Can I get 5 minutes in? And then I'll see where I'm at. Total permission to stop at that point. So I want to pause here and I want to pose a couple questions to the group. So you can feel free to unmute and speak, or you can type in the chat. But I want to ask what your preferred ways to exercise are. I know we all have different preferences. Some people love to walk, some people hate it. So share your preferred ways, and let's start to apply this more than 0. Like, how might you apply more than 0 to your current exercise routines? So feel free. And I don't know why I lost my chat again, but there we are. Okay, so Deborah Cohen loves walking and dancing. And let's start off with that first question, like preferred ways to exercise. How do you like to exercise? Water exercise. Yeah, that's a great way to get some good resistance and strengthening, but easier on our joints. And it's just fun to be in the water. What else?
Well, I do hiking, Pilates. I work out with a PD gladiator group twice a week. I do
Awesome.
PD warrior. I do anything, if I think it's going to decrease my symptoms.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really good variety. It sounds like things kind of
Right.
stay novel and interesting. And I've never heard of gladiator classes. That sounds really fun. Maybe.
Well, it is. It's a hardcore exercise class, and the lady that teaches it is just phenomenal. And we also do boxing and just a lot of cognitive work as well.
Yeah, you make a really good point. With physical activity, when we add in that cognitive component where we're having to follow a sequence or follow an instructor, learn a new movement, that is really the cherry on top for exercise
Right.
and overall health. Thank you, Carolyn. And it looks like we have some answers in the chat too. Linda likes to use her stationary bike. Karen mentioned lifting weights, exercise bike as well, boxing, kickboxing and walking. Okay, and it looks like a high intensity cardio class was great, but just caused too much weight loss. Yeah, that intensive exercise can do that for sure. Meredith uses Zoom for exercise classes. That's a great way to stay in your cozy home, but still get a good workout in. Jennifer said circuit training. Yeah, that kind of hit high intensity interval training, and that intensity can be great. Deborah likes to get outside walking, weather permitting. Deborah, I don't know where you live, but that I think in LA, we get a little bit more flexibility with that. Treadmill, stationary bike again. And Deborah's local YMCA offers a Parkinson's group. That's awesome. And Laura said going to HIIT classes. And you use a heart rate monitor when you're off and not competing with others gives a much needed break. Yes, I agree. Oh, Deborah's from Mississippi. Okay. Yeah, so definitely weather permitting for walks. So we have all of these really awesome, varied types of exercise. And my guess is that I want to say the majority of us, if not all of us, have gotten to a day where we're just really feeling low drive, low energy, or maybe other barriers to exercise. And I'm curious if any of you have already applied the more than zero strategy, or maybe you have some ideas of how you can apply it moving forward. And I'm also happy to take questions or to clarify anything. Any ideas of how we might apply more than zero? Okay, Alana says, what if physical issues are making exercise very difficult? Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes our physical symptoms, whether it's from Parkinson's or maybe comorbidities that we have, can get in the way of us doing the exercise that we want to do or would like to do. And I think that's really where PT and OT can come in to help identify modifications to exercises, and also exploring different types of exercise. And Alana or anyone else, I don't know if there's specific examples, whether it's pain or even just orthopedic challenges too.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Oh, okay. I was really doing very well with exercise and doing a variety, and I could really tell how it was really helping to limit the amount of medication. But what happened is that I started having this thing of being dizzy, and it's something called NOH, neurodegenerative orthostatic hypertension, and apparently it can be separate from Parkinson's, but a lot of people with Parkinson's get it. And so what happened is that all of a sudden, well, I just had this constant dizziness. So I was falling a lot. So then I had to start using a walker. And then my legs have gotten, they get wobbly. And so I don't have the, there's no way I can build up strength enough to actually walk without a walker, or so it's really limited. And I can tell it's really, yeah, I'm not doing as well as I was before when I was doing all the exercise. So it's a real dilemma, and it seems like there are a lot of people that are having this kind of problem.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your personal example. Yeah, with orthostatic hypotension, whether it's NOH or just OH, yeah, as you mentioned, really common with Parkinson's. And, you know, I think there's a few approaches to start to problem solve. Some of it might be addressing the orthostatic hypotension. So looking at, you know, hydration, electrolytes, and seeing if your doctor recommends ways to help with that hypertension. I also think with an OT, with a PT, your own problem solving, thinking about exercises that allow you to strengthen and allow you to get a good workout while staying safe, right? And so, you know, to give some examples, if one of my clients is experiencing dizziness for any reason, right, or imbalance, wobbliness, worse than usual days, we might explore seated yoga. We might explore exercises that are supine on our back, that are still strengthening in a good workout, where we can still get a good workout in while feeling safe as we continue to work with our providers to address that orthostatic hypotension, because the goal is always to get back to your preferred forms of exercise, right? But as an intermediate, I think modifications in managing that OH is where it gets started.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So I think for time's sake, I'm going to walk through some of our other examples, because I really want to spend our last chunk of time just opening it up to talk and problem solve together. And I'm definitely not the only one here to answer questions. I think this is a great chance for all of us to share our tips and our ways of getting into our exercise routines and sleep routines and stress. And Deb, I see your chat message. Let's come back to that one when we open up to the floor. I think that's a great one to start with. So let's see. Our next example, is for stress management. So I'm gonna, for time's sake, again, kind of breeze through these, because a lot of it is that problem solving that I want to apply. So for stress management, this is important for that non-motor symptom management with Parkinson's. So 50% of people with Parkinson's will experience depression and 40% will experience anxiety. And why is this? Could be psychological factors, environmental factors. Sometimes symptoms and just our change in function itself can be disheartening, discouraging, and stress producing. But it can also sometimes be biological. Sometimes with Parkinson's, there are changes to GABA neurotransmitter in our brain, and that can have impact on mood, anxiety, depression. So for stress and mood, this is something that, I always tell my clients that I will not pretend to have a psychologist and therapist training. They are wonderful. And there are parts of managing stress and mood that's not in my scope. So as an OT, I might collaborate with their psychologist or therapist, or refer them to one. But in OT, we're really back to that activity, right? Meaningful activities that occupy our time. So we might explore certain techniques together, like stress coping and relaxation, forms of play, or returning to meaningful activities that they've maybe stopped engaging in that help them relieve stress. Exploring how we might increase our social activities if that is lacking. Sensory strategies too can help to modulate our nervous system. So either calm our nervous system or energize our nervous system as needed. And we're really looking too at that habit and routine development. So how do I make sure that I'm managing my stress consistently and regularly to prevent those times when I'm really going up to a high level of stress where it's so much harder to come back down and regulate. And of course, looking at other factors that contribute to our stress, right? Sometimes when we haven't eaten in a while or we're dehydrated, that can affect our mood, as one example, right? Or sleep, as we'll talk about soon. So for a more than zero example, I'm going to throw one out here, but then we'll move to sleep so we can open up the floor to everyone. But for example, let's say one of my clients finds that doing a 10-minute guided meditation really does the trick for her. It really helps to regulate her, help her feel relaxed and calm. But let's say that because of time constraints or just bandwidth, not feeling like doing a whole 10 minutes, she's at this decision-making point, right? Do I just move on and keep going through my day? Or do I find a way to engage in more than zero stress coping, right? Can I do a breathing technique for 30 seconds? Can I call up a friend or text them for a few minutes and just get that social connection aspect? So how can I problem solve, still getting a dose of self-regulation? And for sleep too, I'd be curious to hear how much of us here present today have challenges with sleep, because it's unfortunately very common with Parkinson's, and it can show up in different ways. So trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, falling back asleep. It can be active sleep, so talking, moving, laughing in our sleep. And it can even be diagnosable as REM sleep behavioral disorder. There might be nocturia, so waking up frequently in the night to use the bathroom. Sleep mobility challenges, so just challenges moving in bed at night, or getting out of bed to go use the bathroom. Daytime sleepiness and sleep apnea too can be very common. So OTs love talking about sleep. I hope that's not a generalization. I think we oftentimes don't think of sleep as a meaningful activity, but OTs feel that it for sure is, right? It's really meaningful for us to get high quality sleep, so that we can then engage in our activities during the daytime. So we can come back to this slide as needed, but OTs can help with a variety of factors, including improving our sleep hygiene, our routines surrounding our sleep, like sleep wind down at night, sleep positioning for pain, or to help alleviate tremor or dyskinesias, and also reducing daytime napping, right? So there's different factors there. And a more than zero example might be, let's say one of my clients creates a really beautiful sleep wind down routine. So she starts with some high intensity closing up the house, cleaning up the house, maybe cleaning up after dinner, doing some stretches. And then she goes down to a moderate intensity thing of reading, and then maybe low intensity does a 10-minute meditation. So that's really beautiful when we have the time and the bandwidth to do that. However, if there's a night where that just doesn't seem possible for whatever reason, what is a more than zero example of doing something to regulate our sleep, to facilitate sleep? So she might choose one thing from that list, or a bare bones routine. Maybe we're not doing reading for the 30 minutes, but maybe I'm just reading a few poems from my poetry book, right? So how can we still get that dose of a health promoting routine? And so we'll open it up to everyone, but more than zero is something that is meant to be flexible. It's meant to be really broad, because our healthy habits are not simple and clear cut, right? Just exercise, just get better sleep, just improve your stress. So it provides a way for us to have flexibility depending on how varied our days are, how our symptoms fluctuate from Parkinson's or maybe any other comorbidities. It allows us to check in with our bodies and actually engage in activities that match with where we are that day. So it's like my example of walking up to the stop sign. If it's truly a day where you need to rest more, then you head back home. Or if it's a day where your body's craving more movement, you keep on going. And this can also prevent boom and bust cycles. So this overexertion and then paying for it later that day or the next day with more pain or more fatigue or just more symptoms in general. And my biggest hope is that it makes space for self-compassion, right? So as opposed to not listening to our body or what we're needing or what kind of routine we're wanting to engage in, just following through with brute force. Instead, more than zero asks, like, what do I want and need to do today? So we'll open this up to apply it to physical activity, to sleep, to stress management. But if there are other lifestyle factors that come to mind for you too, like eating routines, symptoms management in general, we can apply it there as well. But before I leave the screen, that's my contact information if you have lingering questions after today's talk. But I also want to say thank you for making time and showing up today and allowing me to be part of your community. So I'm going to stop share. I think there's some things in the chat. Let's see. And Sharon, I'm planning to just look at the chat and go through that. Does that work out?
Yeah, that's fine. And I finally sent an email out to everybody again. I apologize, the time was wrong on the original registration form. And it said 1 o'clock Pacific time. It was 1 o'clock Eastern time. I messed up. So thank you everybody who got here today on time. You know, we make mistakes. So my more than zero was, I had to resend the whole thing out later because I screwed up the first time. But I just want to say, you know, more than zero gives you the flexibility. You know, they say we need 2.5 hours of exercise a week. You can break it up into however it works for you. You know, there was something I just posted on Facebook about 6 minutes a day that works, you know, if you do it every day. Well, you need more than 6 minutes a day to get to 2.5 hours. But, you know, start small. You know, some days you can't do as much. So you don't do as much. It's okay. Give yourself permission.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Great recap of that. I think I hear oftentimes from my clients that managing Parkinson's and living well with Parkinson's can be a huge burden. It can be really overwhelming. And it can feel, you know, like a daily thing where you're not doing enough, or you could do more, you should do more, you failed, right? And that's not a way to live, right? And so I really like to offer people more than zero so that we can start to give ourselves that flexibility and self-compassion of, you know, I didn't quite hit that mark today, but that's okay. I know that I'll have a day where I'll kind of make up for it, right? And not push through it, but I'll just have more energy, more bandwidth. And I think it can help us reduce the risk of getting into those like disheartened period where we're feeling maybe depressed or just apathetic because we feel like we've been failing consistently for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I think more than zero can help keep us consistent too, where it's like, well, I did okay this week, right? Let's see what next week has in store and just keep chugging along day by day, more than zero. So I wanted to circle back to Deborah's comment. And so feel free, like, as we're going through these, I want to chat about Deborah and Karen's comments, but feel free to unmute and add to the chat as well. So Deborah says, I have spinal stenosis and osteoporosis, so cannot do boxing. Even big move hurts my back. And Deborah teaches a bone density exercise class, but PT told her to avoid 2 integral exercises. Let's see. And I should say too, I have not evaluated all of you. So these examples that I'm giving out are examples, right? So definitely chat with your healthcare providers. Because Deborah, I would definitely defer to your PTs who work with you with their recommendations. But I am curious, and other people feel free to unmute too if you have ideas for Deborah. But like boxing, for example, right? I think my OT brain goes to the many, many different ways that we can modify this activity of boxing, right? Maybe it means we are using a wall as a touch point for balance help, right? Maybe we don't need that every day, but we're using it for a day where we need that. Maybe we're using a chair with a back rest that goes all the way up to maybe our shoulders, shoulder blade level. So we can use that for support for any spinal back pain, right? We might explore ways to do seated punches, because I don't know if you all have tried boxing punches seated. It does get your heart rate up and your arms do get tired, just as if you were standing up. So that can be a way to help manage any like higher pain days. And yeah, I'd be curious for integral exercises, Deborah, does that mean like total body or intensive?
It involves upper body, lower body exercises. So I was told to avoid the front leg lift and the back leg lift, and there are only 3 leg lifts in the routine.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's not many like options from that, right? And possibly something to consider is asking your PTs, you know, like what would you recommend as a modification? Because they can really take into account what they know about you and your body to see if there's ways to maybe target the same muscle groups, to target the same intensity while keeping you safe and hopefully pain flare free.
My PT told me to walk 5 to 8 miles a day. I only do 3 to 5 right now. And I didn't think 5 to 8 was exactly practical.
Yeah.
Just in terms of time.
Right. I know that's what I have to remind myself, and I remind my clients that their life is not seeing me. I'm not the center of their life. They have a life, right? And time demands and things that they want to do and need to do. So I think, you know, that modification is key, because I would so much rather someone walk 3 to 5 miles than just not at all because they feel like that 8 mile is unreasonable, right? So it sounds like you're making really great modifications, and maybe something that your PT or OT can help you with is making a modification to those kicks or any of the other boxing or big moves that you really enjoy doing. And Karen had a really great idea for you, punching while on an exercise bike. That sounds like a great way to get some back support and manage like any pain or energy, but still getting a little bit of that like boxing and
recumbent bicycling, perhaps even. And if you're able to use your opposite hand when you're cycling, like it sometimes even slowing that down, because I've found that one of the things, I do this by myself sometimes, from what I learned is alternate motion is a challenge. So even in your situation, circumstances, if you can get a recumbent bicycle or any type of exercise bike, making your right hand go out when your left leg is up on the pedal, and then alternating, because that's, you know, it kind of helps make a new pathway for me. And I did that the day before. I went through my whole dose, couldn't get myself out of the gym, but then the next day my dystonia in my face felt better. So I was like, wow, you know, there was like a payout to that. So
yeah. And that cross body movement, that like connecting our right and our left together, Karen, is so
Yeah.
good for just like any exercise where we want to target our neurology, right? So that
Yeah.
crossing of the body and that alternating is a great idea. So Deborah, you have some ideas from Karen, and then maybe your PTs will have even more to modify.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And Karen, your question about REM sleep disorder and external circumstances. Yeah,
Yes.
can you like elaborate on that?
Sometimes I would say the anxiety doesn't come within you. It's created from an external source, from someone that sometimes, unfortunately, in our lives, there are people that are reading a handbook of how to create stress with
great way to put it.
intention, with focused intention. And there's a certain population of people that need to find ways to get away from things that are harmful to us, as if it were a kryptonite toxin. So what it's a lot of management, because if it's not coming from within you, but it's creating it, you have to almost find a path of least resistance, while you're also managing your symptoms.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point that sometimes,
Where do you go?
yeah, the stress is maybe caused by people in our life, like interpersonal stressors is a common one that I hear, whether it is with, friends or family not understanding the condition, or just unrelated to the Parkinson's, just like stressful people
Yes.
in our lives. And
Mhm.
while I always wish that I could snap my OT fingers and take care of those for my clients, we only have control over what we do, right? So sometimes, depending on what my client needs, we might talk about assertive communication and self-advocacy and boundary setting. And I overlap quite a bit with my psychology counterparts, at least in our clinical dynamic with that. We might also explore self-regulation routines, right? So seeing, is your toolbox full of varied things that you can do and modify to help cope and regulate, or not, right? And in some circumstances, it might mean, working with a therapist one-on-one, or if it's with a family member, like co-counseling. And that's really where it's, out of my scope and I'll refer out. But I think as an OT, I oftentimes work on like strategies and techniques to help cope with that stress.
Yeah, it's a stress management thing.
Yeah. And
Like-
yeah, I think there's so many different healthcare providers, which is awesome, right? OT, psychologists, therapists, social workers. I think all healthcare providers, I hope at this point, are taking into account mental health and emotional health, social health, right? So I think any one of your healthcare providers might have some really great tips for how to manage stress, or at least know someone that they can refer you to. But yeah, stress is a tough one. So that's something that I could go on for another hour about, for stress management, because it's one of my favorite topics. But Sharon, I think is it about time to wrap up, or do we have time for one more?
You can answer we have one more question. It's fine. And then
Got it. Okay. Are there specific exercises that can help raise blood pressure when you have orthostatic hypotension? That is a great question. So most exercises will increase our blood pressure, right? Because we're putting demands on our body for blood flow, for oxygen. So most exercises will increase that blood pressure, but I'm guessing that your question, Carol, is in relation to how do we raise the blood pressure so that when we go and stand up or have positional changes, the OH is not making us as dizzy or imbalanced. And that's something that, for time's sake, I will say OT and PT can really help you identify things to do to help get that blood pressure up. But I oftentimes will see what it's like for my clients to do some like calf raises to get some blood flowing, just get a little bit of movement in, whether it's some like twists, right? Some power twists for those of you who know the power program, maybe some marches with your legs. And when you stand up, standing up slow and with control, taking a pause, not locking your knees out, right? So there's a combination of things that could work well for you, but since I'm not sure what your different like factors are, I will say like defer to your healthcare providers. But yeah, I definitely want to make sure that we have time to transition to our next thing. So I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I love connecting with the community. So I appreciate all of you making time this Sunday. And thank you, Sharon, for inviting me.
Oh, thank you. I'm just going to add one little thing about the raising blood pressure. My doctor suggested I add a little salt to my diet, and it has helped immensely. And either I snack on popcorn or the mini pretzels. I keep mini pretzels by my bed nightstand because I'll eat a couple before I go to bed. So if I get up in the middle of the night, I'm not falling over. So it helps. If you can take the extra salt, do it. But I'm not a doctor, so I can't prescribe. I'm just saying what worked for me. Okay, Ashlyn, can we put the slides back up? Thank you. Okay, next slide. So we are giving our virtual tiara to Malia Sako. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was wonderful. I really appreciate you coming. I went to Malia for some sleep issues, and I was basically on my iPad way too much. So, and I'll leave it at that. Okay, next slide. We have our scholarships to the World Parkinson's Congress, and we've had a couple of people who have had to drop out, but we've also added 2 more, Deborah Doxey and Kathy Gaston, and we have 1 more we're waiting to get some information from, and I think that will be it. Next slide. And if you are going to the World Parkinson's Congress, please let me know that you're coming. Because we are planning some activities together. If you're registering, you can list Twitchy Woman as your official organization. That we just added that this week. We have a private Facebook group for those who are going to make our plans in Barcelona. As I said, we're going to get together in Barcelona with other Twitchy women. And so just send me an email if you want to be, if you are going to Barcelona. Thank you. Next slide. And we've got a lot coming up. People are calling me and emailing me all the time. Everybody wants to come speak to our group now. So very popular group. So February 12th, in 2 weeks, we have Patricia Miller, who will be talking about speech therapy for Parkinson's. 2 weeks later, Judy Spencer, who is the conductor for the World Parkinson's Choir. And that should be very interesting. They're always singing at the opening evening of the choir, and they have rehearsals that you can participate in as well from the comfort of your own home. And then March 12th, we have Dr. Peter Tass with his Vibrating Gloves for Parkinson's study, and that should be really interesting. And it is our 3rd anniversary celebration. If you would be interested in being on a planning committee for the 3rd anniversary, please let me know. We had a lot of fun last year. We had some prizes that we gave out. We raised some money. We just had a lot of fun. March 26th, urban polling will be back. If you already have your polls, make sure you have them available that day so you can do some exercises. If you don't have polls, join us anyway, because you'll find out why you should have some walking polls. They are great. And then we have a couple more speakers coming up. One on the Parkinson's Foundation's Aware and Care Kits, and possibly another program on improv. And there's a couple more, and I can't even remember, but we are booking into May at this point, which is pretty amazing. Next slide. And as always, we have our 2 chat groups, Tuesday mornings with Shelley. Anybody is welcome to come to that one. And on Sunday mornings before our regularly scheduled meetings, we have our Twitchies Without Partners. And please join us if you are a Twitchy woman without a partner. We do some problem solving. We are going to be talking about care kits putting together a care kit for Twitchies Without Partners, and some other things will be coming up, more information coming soon. And the last thing I want to say is my wonderful daughter has been revamping my website. If you haven't been on it recently, I would suggest you check it out because I think it's much easier to navigate and find things. And let me know what you think. And I think that is it.